Appears we have about 5 items on the agenda today. The first appears to be a sidewalk program. Just for clarification, this is the, sidewalk program that we do annually to repair sidewalks. This is just the standard, before we get into, the actual sidewalk program that we're looking to implement, not the one that we just previously held the committee meeting on. Okay. I don't know if see Councilman Joke has now joined us. I don't know if there's somebody that wants to speak to that. I don't know if any of my colleagues have any questions on it.
I mean, I just think until we have a municipal sidewalk program, we still have folks that were in the queue to get their sidewalks redone through the accessible sidewalk program. And so this is the funding to move forward with that. So there's already folks, waiting in the queue. So Chris Ettinger is on here that can answer any specific questions, but that's the general idea.
Anybody have any questions on this item? No. All right, I'll make a motion to put it on the agenda. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. Next item, the acquisition of 945, 951 South Geddes Street. Is there somebody that can speak to that item?
Yeah, sure. Michelle Sapansky's on here, who I think is going to speak to that particular item.
Hi, counselors. Michelle Sabansky, Neighborhood and Business Development. 945-51 South Geddes. This is a property that we had recently. It was a 3-family structure. There was a fire there within the last couple of weeks, and the property was subsequently had to have an emergency demolition. As part of the demolition, the city, we cover the cost, which was roughly $37,000 out of our CDBG blighted property line that we have to cover the demolition and the air monitoring. And as part of the conversations with the property owner, the city essentially has the opportunity to acquire this property with the understanding that we just basically cover that demolition out of our CDBG as we already have. Typically, the way that this happens with emergency demolitions like that is we will use that blighted property line anyways, and then we will have to try to collect it off of the taxes. It typically, if the property is already tax current, it will often take about 3 years or so for it to go through the standard kind of tax feasibility, eligibility procedures that we have with all the other land bank properties. And it will involve a lot of city staff time, legal time, all of that. In this particular situation, given that the property owner was receptive to moving forward with that, the thought was that this would be a very strategic parcel for the city to try to acquire, given its location on a really highly traveled commercial corridor. It's directly across from Delaware School, and it is also directly adjacent to some other city-owned property. So all in all, we would have approximately 0.4 of an acre of contiguous land that would be under the proposed zoning ordinance MX5. So there's a lot of opportunity there to do something pretty strategic. So given the opportunity that presents itself, that's kind of what we're looking at with that for right now. So I don't know if there's any additional questions.
Yeah, Michelle, do we have a plan on what we'd like to do with the property, or just simply that we're going to take it over? We don't want it to go through the whole process, and we'll determine what we're going to do with it at a later date? Or do we have ideas or plans that this is actually playing into?
So there isn't, given the circumstances for how we're acquiring it, it isn't like there's a specific proposal that we have on the table right now that we're considering. I think certainly there's a lot of groups that are meeting regularly within the city as far as city-owned property and what's kind of for some of these like larger parcels that the city owns, what's the most efficient way to think about marketing them, keeping in mind kind of what's the ultimate highest and best land use from an overall planning perspective. I think this is kind of presents a really unique opportunity to potentially go a lot of different ways with it. And I think the priority, I guess, at least from neighborhood and business development, is that we're thinking about it kind of really strategically, keeping in mind all of those goals and ultimately what comes down to kind of the best outcome for the overall neighborhood. So all of those would be kind of up for discussion, and I think that it would be something that would kind of move forward as a topic of discussion through the property review committee that is regularly meeting for the property disposition. And obviously, if there were to be any additional movement through any sort of RFP, we would certainly look to go that route. But
Okay, any further questions?
Yes, maybe this Michelle and Corey, what is the usual cost of a demolition with that size of a building?
It usually will depend on the cost of the structure. For a typical single or two-family house, anywhere from 20 to 25,000 for the demolition, and then the required environmental monitoring that we have to do. This was a 3-family mixed-use structure, so it was a little bit bigger than things that we would typically be on the most common list of things that we're doing court order demolitions for. It's more often than not the single and two families, which is the reason for a little bit larger cost here.
So in a sense that when we say we are somewhat getting the in exchange of waiving waiving the cost that we had incurred doing the demolition, is that I feel like if you are saying the demolition of that size usually costs about $25,000 and there's $39,000 here.
Sure. So this particular
trade.
So this particular line, the city regularly annually will take a portion of our CDBG allocation that comes from HUD at the federal level. We put that aside in what's called the Blighted Properties Fund, specifically for cases like this where we know that there's going to be emergencies that come up that the city essentially has to foot the bill for the demolition. It's an emergency. It has to come down right now. And then typically what we will try to do is kind of collect that through any sort of like collections process, putting a lien on the property, all of that. So in the cases where we fund emergency demos out of this blighted property line, any money that ultimately does come back is kind of like money that we paid out of HUD in the first place. It's not like the city taxpayers directly funding that out of the general fund. Does that make sense?
So
Now,
yes, it does make sense. Yeah, it does make sense. Now, so if I am understanding correctly, the property owner is willing to walk away and just give everything to the city, so long as the legal requirements are fulfilled in terms of paper signing and all of that.
Yep.
Okay.
Now, do we believe that this parcel, now that it's demolished and there's nothing on it, that it's actually worth the $37,000 or $39,000 that we're, going to essentially forgive for the property?
So in terms of assessed value, I think it's more of a question of the full value of everything that is contiguous to it that is already city owned, and kind of like what is the ultimate development potential for that. So it certainly presents an opportunity for the city to be able to market a larger piece of land on a commercial corridor that is proposed to have MX5 zoning, I believe. So I think kind of from that standpoint of like what could the ultimate use be, it seems like it would likely justify the cost. But
I guess, and then my question following Councilor Carney's question is, considering that is, and I guess this could be Owen's question in terms of zoning planning and all of that. Considering that the property is across school, and my understanding of MX5 is that it is highly commercial. I guess I'm trying to understand that their logic of putting it KMX5 and the and the return for the city, considering that if we put something like that across school, will neighbors have a pushback in the future, preventing us to sell it to a person that would use it as MX5, which overall may not give us the investment that we are foreseeing and projecting here. Is that am I clear?
So I think that's probably if your question is what is the justification for that particular area with its new kind of proposed zoning, that's definitely a question for Owen. And I should clarify, it might be MX4. I was referencing my printed map over here and my colors are a little blending together. It is definitely MX 4 or 5, like in a mixed use category. As far as the justification for the particular parcels, that would be something you would need to check with Owen on.
No, and I get that. I would need to talk to Owen, but for you, putting everything into consideration, that we are trading, we are giving up this much money, and this for a future potential, considering that all the city is moving toward making these a highly commercial property. You know, goes back to my first question. Do you think this is a fair trade?
So, I mean, it's the 900 block of South Geddes Street. So the street is already a very kind of relatively high commercial, high traffic area. There's not a lot of, particularly in that area where it's situated, as far as like within the immediate South Geddes corridor, like single and two family housing. So I think like directly across from Delaware School, and kind of thinking about the entire area of South Geddes Street from here to Fayette Street, it certainly is something that kind of fits in with the character of that area. And again, I would emphasize that like any specific plans for the property moving forward would all be something that would be ongoing discussion. We don't have an immediate proposal that on the table that we're considering for it. We're simply saying that the opportunity to be able to have the city kind of be the steward of the site control right now seems like something that would make sense, as opposed to essentially if we were to need to try to do it through any other sort of legal means, or letting it go through the court system or the standard tax seizure process. That the overall kind of trade-off costs, that this seems like the better way for the city in terms of our resource distribution. So again, this is all stuff that if there were any decisions to be made for it, would certainly come before groups within the city, to the council again, before any final decisions would be made. So
Michelle, I guess, my concern and what I'm trying to wrap my head around is this is really sort of an atypical thing. Like we don't, I'm used to us, going after property owners, getting that money back into that, pool of money to do more demolitions or to at least recoup whatever we've spent. I'm just trying to understand why we would do it in this specific situation. I mean, do we know that the property owner is not going to pay us back for what we had done, that we'd have to go through, the legal steps to actually put a lien and go after the individual? Or or do we know that the person's just going to sit on the lot and do nothing with it after the fact?
So we would need to check with Jake as far as the specifics of the kind of negotiations that he had with the property owner. In this particular case, I can tell you that generally speaking, when we're doing these emergency demos, the collections that we're getting on them, very often the city is eating the cost of them through the use of our distressed properties line. We certainly do the best that we can to collect on them, but ultimately, there's a lot of these properties that we regularly, annually will have to do as emergency demos that we are not getting the money back at all whatsoever. So, and again, I think that's part of the reason why like we have distressed properties specifically from CDBG. It isn't something that is directly coming out of the general fund for the city. So. I don't know if that answers your question, but
I mean, did the property owner have like insurance that we could go after the insurance company to recoup not just, the actual cost of it, but then the cost of our legal expenses, the time. I mean, that's again, I'm trying to understand this a little bit better because this is again not something that we've traditionally done in the past. I know I've had a couple in my district as of recently that we've had to do emergency demos and we've gone after the individual and and tried to recoup all of our costs. So I'm just without having a plan or a known, like if there was some project that we were planning on doing, I guess this would be a no-brainer that okay, we need that parcel, that's why we're doing this. I'm just trying to understand why we're doing it this way with this specific property.
sure. I think Jake and Michael are probably the best suited to answer that question. I know that they certainly had those conversations, and I'm mostly here today filling in for them because they both had a conflict that they weren't able to be here. So they're definitely the best people to answer that question. So
I can get that I mean, I can do some follow-up with Commissioner Collins and Jake, if that's helpful, Counselor, to the whole committee.
Are there any more questions from my colleagues?
Yeah, I have a brief question, Councilor Carney.
Yeah, absolutely.
Michelle, I kind of agree with what Councilor Carney is saying, is that we definitely need to get to the bottom of kind of how this happened, because I could see a situation in which the valuation on the property is much higher than that, that $39,000, figure, which could be good to us, but it also could, provide the opportunity for this, landowner to, basically get a windfall at the expense of the city. So I'm wondering, in this process, did anybody look at what the actually assessed value of the property was?
I can double check what that number is and follow up with all of you. So to be clear, what would be happening with this is that the city or that the property owner is deeding control of the property over to the city in exchange for us not going after the demolition. So I don't know that the windfall would be a.
Well, I mean,
I don't know how the property owner would be
you have
getting
the
a windfall.
opportunity to submit an insurance claim over the fire,
Gotcha.
right?
Okay.
So I'm not saying that's necessarily our problem, but that is just something that could be an unintended consequence of the way that we're doing this.
Sure,
right?
sure. Yeah.
And you've been asked several different times, are we getting a fair deal here? And I think the short answer to that could be very easily figured out by figuring out what the assessed value of that land is as it currently sits.
Sure. Yeah, we can follow up with everyone as far as the specific questions about the insurance. I totally understand what you're saying, and we can get that answer for all of you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to be honest. I don't really feel comfortable moving this. I don't know if any of my colleagues on the council feel strongly enough compelled to say that we should move it. I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions that I don't feel comfortable moving it. I don't know if anyone, feels
I'm not
strongly on that.
I'm with you, Counselor.
Okay.
I agree with
All right.
you.
So then, okay, great. I'm going to hold this item then. So the next item appears to be a donation of a bike repair and pump. I don't know if there's, I think Mary, Rosen, if you can, I think that's your item, but I'm not sure.
Yep. Good afternoon, counselors. Yes. The Pedals to Possibilities would like to donate a bicycle repair stand to the city, which would be installed by our DPW trades crews. It would be placed along the creek walk at Oxford Green, which is near the Midland and Bellevue intersection along the creek walk. Repair stand would be for free public use. Pedals to Possibilities has agreed to maintain it. Our only obligation would be to install it. And the approximate value of the equipment being donated is $1,000.
Any questions for anyone on this item?
So I have a quick question. So it's just a air pump? So anybody that's along the creek walk would be able to have access to?
It also has tools that are connected with cables to the stand. So I think you'd be able to make some adjustments to your bike, you know, probably different types of wrenches and screwdrivers and stuff.
Any further questions? All right, I'm gonna make a motion to move it on the agenda. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, great. All right, Mary, I think you also have the next item, appears to be like a
Yes.
bridge repair for the train.
This is the bridge that had the concrete parapet wall fall. I believe it was in the summer of 2018 along South Clinton Street between West Onondaga Street and Dickerson Street. There's a grant being offered called the New York State DOT Passenger and Freight Rail Assistance Program, acronym PFRAP. New York State, Susquehanna, and Western owns this bridge, and they approached us to submit a grant on behalf of them for the repair of this bridge structure. So now if you look up on the bridge, there's these temporary concrete jersey barriers that are installed, but they would remove those barriers and put up more aesthetically pleasing precast concrete walls, which would mimic what was originally installed way back in the early 1900s. They're also planning to do some concrete bridge pier repairs and abutment repairs, which I think would also improve the aesthetic look of the bridge instead of looking at the delaminated concrete piers. So I think this project would greatly enhance the aesthetics of the bridge, as well as obviously improve the safety of the bridge. There would be no cost to the city. The grant would be under our name, but the New York Susquehanna Western is preparing the grant application. And if we were awarded the grant, which the amount's not to exceed $4 million, New York Susquehanna and Western would put forward the local match, which is 10%, and they would also hold all the contracts for the design, the construction, and basically we would be a pass-through. You know, the money would pass through us, so they would give us all the documentation of the bills that they paid, and we would submit it to the state and then get reimbursed, and then give New York Susquehanna and Western the money back. But if we got the grant, we'd have to do an MOU, so there would be further legislation coming to you regarding approval of an MOU of all the details of how the management and process would work.
Any questions on this item? Okay, hearing none, I'll make a motion to put it on the agenda. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. And I think just the last item is approval for a mobile food vending location. I don't know if there's someone here that can speak to that item.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So this legislation is requesting an additional mobile food vending location in the parking lot for the Creek Walk at Oxford Street. This is a resident of the area who operates a food cart. I believe it's Soul Food Extension Food Cart. She's operated downtown for a number of years, but lives in this area of the Creek Walk and requested that we dedicate a spot. And so, you know, it's gone through engineering, MVD, DPW. We checked with New York State DOT to make sure there weren't any restrictions related to the Creek Walk. There's not. She will be subjected to the same standards as every other mobile food vendor. And I believe this will now become an additional location that we can enter into the lottery for mobile food vendors. So we think it's a great amenity to offer on the Creek Walk and kind of expand you know, the footprint of mobile food vendors in the city.
Is this Mercedes, Corey?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Okay. Yeah, she literally lives right there.
Yes.
Like right next to it. Okay.
Right.
Any questions on this item?
Yeah, I just have a brief question. So Corey, so right now this spot would automatically be awarded to this one business?
I believe so. I think that's how it would work this time. I don't know. Eric, can you remind me? It would be operated by her by this time, but then in the future it would go into the lottery.
Yeah, that's correct, Corey, and good afternoon, Councilors. Eric Anna. So this year, Mercedes would have that designated spot for this current vending season. And then the legislation includes the fact that the city would have the ability to enter the site into the lottery in the future, so that it's not a guaranteed spot for Mercedes in the future, but just like every other potential vendor, they have the ability to apply to seek that location for the next season after that. So because of Mercedes' request, it would be for this season, she would be that designated vendor, and then going forward, it would be included as part of the lottery.
Understood. Is there any way that a particular, business could, reserve a spot like that?
So to my knowledge, Counselor, I know the lottery has been one that has been the process in the past, and I know that it's something, vendors, depending on their geographic location, their preferences, their clientele, you start to see some of the folks that they request the same location year after year, and this is just one where Mercedes found this location to be more advantageous. I don't oversee the process, so I'd have to get back to the experts on that in terms of what a permanent I guess request for a permanent site would be, but certainly I can get more information for you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thanks, Eric.
Any further questions on this item?
So just Eric, I guess before when we were dealing with mobile food and rodeo and the other stuff, one of the pushback that we got was that we were approving too many, right? We were approving too many at once. Now, what does that do? What does this do to that argument?
Sure. So last year, there was extensive conversation about mobile food trucks. Now, one thing I do just want to clarify what this application is for is actually more of it's kind of a pop-up food cart. This is similar to ones that you've seen in the past in downtown Syracuse that are popular. So this is not essentially a full-scale food truck. This is something where, again, it's the ability to kind of assemble it during the day, take it, and kind of bring your materials home, and then bring it back the next day to set up this food stand. So it's a little different from the next year. I think that concerns from businesses that were shared in the past, I know that was focused on certainly in the downtown and central business district area, but this is an existing food vendor that has been doing this operation for several years. Just found this location to be certainly a little bit more advantageous with the location of the creek walk. So in our internal discussions, there was not any concerns from our perspective, and we did make sure this is something that would be permissible. And it is something that I think the business owner thinks could be a great location for them.
And I think one of our overarching goals in the entire mobile food vendor conversation was to try and spread it out a little bit more, that there are a lot of places that people gather. It's not always just downtown. And so I think this is a great opportunity to offer those who are walking, biking, passing by on the creek walk to take advantage of a local neighborhood, to Councilor Allen's point, very local, business that to offer this amenity on the creek walk. That's all I got.
Okay. Any further questions on this one? No. Okay. I'm going to make a motion to put it on the agenda. Can I get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. That was the last item, and call the meeting to an end. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.